From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. A production of iHeartRadio.
Hello, welcome back to the show. My name is Matt. Noel is on an adventure today.
They call me Ben. We are joined as always with our super producer, Paul Mission Control Decant. Most importantly, you are here. And that makes this stuff they don't want you to know. Matt, today's episode is a follow-up on an earlier listener mail segment from a few weeks ago.
It's been a minute.
Years ago. What year is it?
Who knows? I have no idea what's happening, where we are, when it is. It's all good. We talked about this previously.
Yeah, I went outside yesterday and actually had to go somewhere, and I felt just like Robin Williams in Jumanji. You know, when he burst out in his hirsute. Anyway,
he was always hirsute.
He was very much hirsute and a hilarious man. So in this listener mail segment, you and I learned about a enormous ongoing controversy concerning the sport and science of boxing and a person named Daniel Kinahan. Daniel Kinahan is an Irishman who currently lives in Dubai. He wants to be a boxing promoter, and he's got a lot of influence in the world of boxing on multiple levels. The world of what could be described as combat sports, I think, would be more accurate. He is also I want to be careful how I say this, he is widely suspected to be the head of an international crime ring, sort of like a, maybe not quite on the level of Pablo Escobar, who pretty much controlled a country at one point. But it is like an alternate reality version of like what would happen if Pablo Escobar got into boxing in a big way. In today's episode, we're taking a closer look at this story as well as the darker side of boxing overall. And yes, folks, we know what you're thinking. Wait, boxing? Two guys beating the shit out of each other in a way that can lead to permanent injury. What could be more wholesome than that? What do you mean dark side, guys?
How can there be anything wrong with that sport? Dude, that's a whole episode too, talking about the lasting effects of the sport of boxing in particular. All combat sports, but boxing in particular due to the nature of the gloves and the trauma that happens to the head constantly. American
football as well. I think it was. Did you work on that video with us about concussions?
I did. I made that video. Yeah,
you made that video. Okay, yeah. I think you made that video, and I was just sort of there. I think
you wrote a lot of the stuff that Jason Hoke, who formerly was head of content here or head of content at Stuff Media. Yeah, he does the voiceover.
We don't even remember all the stuff we've done anymore.
No, but it's a serious thing, like concussions alone, but there's all kinds of other damage that can be done with it. So there's already a serious danger to it for anyone participating. But it also appears like there's a serious danger to people on the periphery and people who are running some of the show here.
And before we really dive in, we want to make it clear that we personally understand that there is an art to this pursuit. There is a science. This is not the episode where Matt and Ben just dunk on boxing and the sport itself. We're actually, no. I think I enjoy watching it and trained just a little bit with it back in the day. But Matt, you out and out love boxing, right?
Boxing has a very special place in my heart because my father and I used to watch it together. We had Showtime, and there was, Showtime always would have special fights, like regular fights that would come on. We would also, back in the late 90s when we were hanging out a lot together, we would watch like Evander Holyfield go up against somebody. We'd watch the Tyson fight. So yeah, there's a special place in my heart for it. And I did a lot of like karate and stuff when I was a kid. So I was really into the strikes, the actual strikes, and what does it look like, and how do you avoid, and how do you evade, and I'm very much into the science of it. And actually, Ben, you and I have discussed before. This is a little inside baseball. We have discussed going into some MMA style training right before the quarantine occurred.
Still very much on. No Krav Maga though.
Well, I mean, yeah, we can skip the Krav Maga, but I'm definitely down to do whatever training you're into, Ben. And so if you're a gym out there in Atlanta and you're interested, hey, we want in if it's safe.
Same. And the reason I should be clear, Matt, I'm not saying categorically no Krav Maga. I just think we should work our way up to it.
I'm down. Throw me in the deep end. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Yeah. And shout out to you for having Showtime as a kid. Fancy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, baby. We had Showtime.
I thought as a child, I thought that was for like sheiks and billionaires. Showtime.
Shoot. I won't even go into Skinamax because we had that too. I learned a lot from pay for TV stuff. I don't know whether there's a statute of limitations here. So Paul, take this out, please, if I am skirting legal lines, but I can't be the only person who found out how to make those cable disc scramblers and black boxes, right? That was a whole new era for me. I don't know what you're talking about, Ben.
All right. I know what we're supposed to be talking about. That's boxing.
That's right.
That's specifically this controversy. So here are the facts. Right now, as we record, there is a fight brewing. 2 fights, in fact. The date for these fights remains unannounced, as does the venue. But the insiders and those in the know believe it may well end up being a fight held in the Middle East. There are 2 boxers, Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury, who are doubtlessly going to be familiar to boxing fans in the audience today. Both of these men are straight up champions in their own right. They're legit. Mm-hmm. And so in this series of 2 bouts, the winner will become the first undisputed heavyweight champion in 20 years, basically.
Yeah, and that just has to do with all of the various organizations like deciding that this is the one person. We are going to crown this one person. Because there are numerous organizations that deal with boxing where, you can win a belt essentially for one organization. Another person can win a heavyweight champion belt on another organization. But this is like the one, the unified.
Yeah, exactly. There's kind of think of it like a pyramid shape of different organizations, right? And you literally fight your way up to the top. So now we are at the peak of the pyramid. We're at the capstone. And this is a huge deal, especially for our friends across the pond on the other side of the Atlantic. Both of these fighters are from England, and that is why a lot of fans, a lot of pundits, enthusiasts of the sport are calling it the biggest fight in British boxing history.
And it is 2 fights, correct? I believe
yes.
It's like they will fight once. Maybe one of them wins. They get to fight again just in case. Or, just to settle the score, or at least attempt to. And that's the one. The second one is like, the first one is a huge draw, tons of money involved. The second one will probably be even bigger.
Oh, yeah. Oh, for sure. No matter what the outcome of the first one is, the world will be watching the second bout. Just to give you a sense of their championships, Anthony Joshua is the current WBA, IBF, WO, and IBO champion. Tyson Fury is the WC and the ring champion. And our story today really starts with Tyson, I would say, with Tyson Fury.
Oh, yeah. And let's talk about him. He's a fascinating character. Really, really fascinating character. We talked about on that previous episode, just watching his rise to fame and to the championship matches and everything. He's a really interesting person. But in June of 2020, this guy, Tyson Fury, he went on Instagram, I believe, and he publicly thanked a specific person, a man named Daniel Kinahan, the one we mentioned at the top, the allegedly Pablo Escobar style figure. thanked him for his help and influence in organizing this huge set of fights. And this simple call out to a name has led to a lot of strange things, a lot of revelations, really, about perhaps this person's involvement in the sport.
Yeah, exactly. So, side note, quick correction, which I thought was hilarious and a little bit disorienting for all of us. In that listener mail segment, we talk about Tyson Fury's moniker, right? And his kind of like public persona that people have of him. He has been called the Gypsy King. That's the name that they've used. And of course, that's a problematic term, but that's what people call him. And that led us to conjecture whether or not he was possible inspiration for Brad Pitt's character in the amazing film Snatch, which still holds up. And so, Brad, I owe you a personal apology because I said something like, look, he's an amazing actor. And that is true. It had to come from somewhere, though. So could it have been Tyson Fury? Well, that is probably not true, unless Fury is even more badass than we have ever imagined, because he was 12 years old when Snatch came out. And other distressing news, the disorienting part, Snatch is about 21 years old now, or will be this year.
And it remains amazing. It is still one of my favorite movies.
It's so good. So,
but honestly, if you're gonna watch Snatch, watch Lock, Stock first, because it's just as good, if not, I don't know, if not better. Just put it out there.
You have to. They've always been a combo meal to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
Like you got to see the Guy Ritchie universe. But yes, so that's a quick correction on our part. As we said, time has been a little funny for us recently. But anyhow, so what's the big deal? Boxers, I would say world famous athletes in general, have a ton of friends. They have entourages. They know a great many people. Well, Kinahan, you see, is no ordinary boxing promoter. We want to say at the beginning, he has no convictions at all. He has a squeaky clean record. If his criminal record were a kitchen floor, you could eat off of it. There is nothing. However, he is wanted for questioning in 3 different places in Europe. And in 2018, an Irish high court claimed that he is, in addition to being a fan of boxing, a senior figure in, quote, organized crime on a global scale. So Fury's public shout out there on social media, which would seem to be like a kind of ephemeral thing. You know what I mean? It's just a post with your friends. This led to a lot of controversy and outrage in the Irish press and in the Irish government.
Yeah, it certainly did. And that group there is the Kinahan cartel. At least that's how it's referred to by the Garda and a couple other international crime fighting organizations. And again, it's got a long history, and we're going to talk about it here in a moment. But you're right, that quick little shout out, it had some effects. The government in Ireland expressed a lot of, what's called outrage in many of the publications, the papers that you'll read there coming out of Ireland. They call it outrage over Kinahan's role as Fury's advisor. You know, saying things like, again, it's like just being publicly outraged, right? Like, we can't believe this is absolutely unacceptable. This is tragic. And they're warning that the reputation to, boxing, this thing that we hold so dear, in clubs around the country and around the world, they're going to be sullied. The reputations are going to be sullied by this association with a guy who has been known to engage in, quote, activities which are completely and utterly unacceptable. And it's a tough thing, like morally, to talk about something like this. And it's a whole discussion you can get into. Is boxing as a sport moral? Is there a morality there? Are we getting into the olden days of gladiators? Is that it's often compared to that when when philosophical discussions occur around that sport and any other combat sport. But the activities which are completely and utterly unacceptable, are terrible things. Murders and drug running and gun smuggling and all kinds of activities. So it's both weird to think of, a country being outraged that this kind of person is involved with a sport that has an underbelly of a black market in betting. But it is true that it is outrageous that those things are occurring and somebody could be involved.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a good point. There's a lot of money on the line as well, which, as we will see, fundamentally alters the equation. You're absolutely right. It's no secret that boxing has had its share of unsavory characters and corruption and real life conspiracies in the form of financial shenanigans and fixed bouts aplenty. But so again, what's the big deal about Kinahan? After all, let us not forget, here in the United States, boxing promoter Don King once literally stomped a man to death. And it was his employee, by the way. He killed someone that worked for him by stepping on them. And that did not hurt Mike Tyson's career one bit. You know what I mean? That didn't hurt other people's careers. And Don King went on to continue working. But Kinahan, as we will come to find, is a bit of a different case. We'll tell you why after a word from our sponsor. Do you love boxing but hate the uncertainty of your hard-earned money going the wrong way on a bet?
Yeah, that's the worst part about it. I've got all this money sitting around. I mean, a couple hundred, but I want to make sure that I'm going to double or triple, maybe even quadruple it.
Yes, as fans of boxing know, predictability is key. That's where Fix-A-Fight comes in. Friends and neighbors, this simple app downloadable to your Android, iPhone, or IGU device will allow you to instantly participate in the real sport of boxing, betting and fixing matches.
Wow. Well, okay, I download the app, and I put my money in, like it asked me to. Now, what do I do?
Why, it's simple. All you need to do is select the fight or sport of your choice, and our dedicated team of 24/7 Fix-A-Friends will be on the scene, waiting to do your bidding. Need an errant chair thrown in the crowd? Do you need a referee to have a sudden bout of conscience? Well, that's where Fix-A-Fight comes in. For the low price of your firstborn child, Fix-A-Fight can give you guaranteed 100% predictable bouts that go your way when it's time to add up the books.
Oh, wow, that's so affordable. I haven't even thought about kids yet. Oh, this is going to be great.
So don't delay. Download Fix-A-Fight today, a subsidiary of Illumination Global Unlimited. Fix-A-Fight is an illegal application and cannot be used in the following sports: boxing, water polo, football, American football, synchronized swimming, pole vaulting, mixed martial podiatry, mixed martial arts, mixed martial ping pong. Use of this app triggers immediate investigation by authorities as well as association with organized crime.
I fixed my wallet with Fix-A-Fight, and you can too.
Here's where it gets crazy. All right, let's just ask, is Daniel Kinahan an Irish Escobar?
Well, to answer that question, Ben, we have to go all the way back to 1977 when Big Dan, as he's sometimes called, was born. He's the son of a man named Christy Kinahan, who is arguably the most interesting person in this story. And if you want, you can really research that guy. Fascinating story. Christy Kinahan. That's his father. Daniel currently resides in the United Arab Emirates, as far as anyone can guess, Dubai, the city there that we've discussed before. And this thing called, it's always referred to as the CAB, kind of like the CIA, I guess, in a way, but not really, more like the FBI. It's Ireland's Criminal Assets Bureau. They claim that Daniel Kinahan controls and manages this thing that they refer to as the Kinahan Organized Crime Group. It sounds very official. The media has dubbed it the Kinahan Cartel. It's what we've mentioned earlier in this episode. And this cartel, or this group, they believe to have been founded by the father of Daniel Kinahan, Christy Kinahan.
Also known as the Dapper Don, at least Christy is, because of his penchant for Panama hats and cool suits. So the authorities in Ireland believe that this Kinahan family, this organization, actively smuggles firearms and drugs into Ireland, the United Kingdom, and the rest of Europe. It is true that Christy Kinahan has in the past been convicted of crimes related to these sorts of pursuits. But if you ask the authorities, that didn't stop him from continuing this career. They believe the Kinahan cartel is huge, with connections ranging as far afield as the Middle East, where Daniel Kinahan is now, to Asia, and all the way to South America.
Yeah, we're talking Russian involvement, all kinds of countries across the globe.
Mm-hmm. Kind of a United Nations of crime. The Irish government believes that Daniel Kinahan essentially inherited the family banana stand, or you know, whatever reference you want to make. He himself has he's in his early 40s. He has successfully avoided being murdered by rival organizations, which definitely attempted to kill him. One time famously attempted to kill him.
Publicly.
And he has also avoided being thrown in jail. But despite this, his name is indelibly attached to the most infamous gang feud in modern Irish history. It's like if you are in Ireland, you wake up in Dublin, you read the morning paper, you see the name Kinahan, this is the first thing you're going to think about.
That's right. It's a drug feud. It's called the Hutch-Kinahan feud. That's at least how it's referred to. And it's a conflict that is the Kinahan organized crime group or the cartel versus this thing called the Hutch gang. And there's a person named Gerry Hutch, Gerry Hutch, who in particular is supposed to be the one kind of running the show in the Hutch family. And there's a large organization there. It's not some, small time thing. And there are many shootings, multiple shootings that have occurred in Dublin and Spain that are very high profile. There was a death toll so far, at least I think the count right now is around 20 or more, but at least 18 to 20 deaths that have occurred because of this feud. And there's something like 60 arrests, I think. And honestly, it's weird because a lot of how this has been playing out ends up in what they would consider the tabloids in Ireland and other parts of the United Kingdom. And it's hard to tell what's fully occurring in the background, maybe that isn't being written about in the papers.
Right. Yeah. So the Irish reporting stays on this, and the recent events have renewed interest in the feud, I would say. Irish authorities never stop thinking about this. And you make a really good point about what we would consider tabloid papers in the UK reporting on these events, because, it's got the sensationalist stuff that is fantastic for readership, right? For ads, for getting attention there. But how accurate are they being versus how speculative or sensational would be a better word.
Yeah, and I don't mean to throw any of those publications under the bus. I would just say from our end here in the States, it's difficult to maybe parse sometimes what's coming out of a publication in Belfast versus what's coming out of a thing that is sometimes considered a tabloid.
Yeah, exactly. And so the feud that began in 2015, murder of Gary Hutch, who was Gerry Hutch's nephew, continues today. The most infamous of these events is probably the Regency Hotel shooting of 2016, when people who were trying to assassinate Daniel Kinahan ended up fatally shooting an associate of the cartel named David Byrne. This is like cinematic. It's a movie level altercation. People are dressed as law enforcement. One guy dresses as a woman. Two other people, I think, get shot, but Byrne is the only fatality. And this gets a lot of coverage in the news because it's such a crazy story. And Matt, I love the point you made. We said, okay, these numbers might be a little bit tricky because we don't know how much stuff went on that never made it to the media, right? Or never made it to the authorities.
Oh, and just in this incident, and we did talk about it before, and Ben, you're doing a great job describing it there. It's just important to know that it's taking place at a weigh-in for a boxing match. That's when this thing goes down. They're in a hotel. You can see video that's occurring, of the official, the fighters are up there. Some of them, they've got their shirts off. They're like posing for the pictures. And then some sounds start occurring out in the lobby of the hotel, and people are running for their lives. There's a harrowing video you can see where there's a child at one point rushing out of one of these back entrances, just saying, "Dad, what was that? Dad, what was that?" And like crying. It's awful to actually watch some of it.
And you're right. That was the Clash of the Clans, which was, we'll get into why this event in particular was a blow to Kinahan's boxing career, which I think it's fair to call the boxing career. So obviously, all of this context, all of this background, it is no surprise that when members of the Irish public read the name Kinahan in the news, they're way more likely to think of gangland murders than they are of boxing matches. At this point, they'll probably think of boxing too, but it'll be the second thing they think of. Kinahan seemed set for a number of years to reinvent his image. Don't think of me as associated with crime. Think of me as associated with boxing. I want to be a big player in the world of boxing, and he's been successful in that regard, especially in the Middle East. Just last year in 2020, he was appointed as a special advisor for KHK Sports there in Bahrain. And in May of last year, he finally spoke to the public. He issued his first public statement on anything since 2016, since the events at the Regency Hotel during the Clash of the Clans.
Yeah, he said, "It is an honor for me to work with His Highness Sheikh Khalid bin Hamad Al Khalifa, Mr. Mohammed Khalid, and the entire team at KHK Sports. KHK Sports has made an impressive mark on the world of combat sports and has fantastic ambitions to grow into a global powerhouse. I look forward to working with the team to realize these dreams and further build Bahrain combat sports into a globally recognized presence." Seems pretty legit.
Spiffy, yeah. I mean, it's without that context, this is a pretty innocuous, polished statement. It sounds exactly like what you're supposed to say when you get a pretty prestigious job like this. You're an advisor to someone who is legally called His Highness.
Yeah.
That's wild. You know what I mean? That is the upper echelon right there. But there are opposing opinions about this, so Kinahan's never been convicted. So could you even say he's quote unquote turning over a new leaf? Could you say that this is not legitimate somehow? There are two really divided camps about this guy. One group absolutely supports him, including boxers themselves. Reporters have asked plenty of boxers about Kinahan, and they get these positive answers with people saying things like, he's a friend of mine. Everybody trusts him. Everybody respects him. And they'll also add, he's being unfairly treated. The press, they say, is out to get him. But people also praise his connections. And, in his defense, this is not something that suddenly happened. It didn't come out of the blue. Daniel Kinahan has been into boxing for years and years and years. In 2012, he set up a company that was at the time called MGM Boxing. They're the group that was running the weigh-in at the Regency in 2016 for their event, the Clash of the Clans, which I think is a weird historical coincidence, right? That there would be a clan war at the Clash of the Clans.
Or at least that was the flashpoint. Yeah, that's interesting. And that brand, MGM Boxing, and all of the gyms associated with it, and the the promotions, it changed names. And what is it was definitely a PR move. It was rebranded as MTK Global, which that MTK stands for Mac the Knife, by the way. And they cut ties with its founder, Daniel K. At least officially, they cut ties with the founder. Publicly, they did that. And this was all in an attempt to get rid of the stigma, or to try and avoid the stigma that came with that Clash of the Clans incident and ensuing gang war.
Yeah, exactly. The issue is that that attempt to cut ties didn't work as well as they had hoped. And the stigma with MTK and organized crime still remains.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And now let's go to the other group. The people who think this guy is definitely like a drug lord and a crime lord. Irish authorities, a huge swath of the Irish media, are not buying this boxing promotion narrative. They argue that despite not ever being convicted of anything, Kinahan took control of the cartel from his father about 5 or 6 years ago because the Dapper Don wanted to retire, and that now Daniel Kinahan himself directly plays a leading role in a cartel that's doing billions of euros of dollars worth of business across 3 continents, and all the while racking up an enormous body count in the process, which to me means that if any of this is true, you can say one thing about Kinahan and boxing. He's not in it for the money, maybe, right? Like he doesn't seem like a guy who's really sweating the water bill.
Yeah, it's weird because when you're that close to boxing, we talked about this before, there's so much money to be made on the level with a boxing match, right? Mm-hmm. With betting that is sanctioned, with the actual winnings, with all the money you make at a big event in person or on pay-per-view. There's a ton of money to be made up here, and there's so much more money to be made down here in the off books betting, or just in the darker side of the betting world. So he may be in it for the money to like run part of this business, but he doesn't need it personally, right? That's the whole point.
Yeah, I think I got myself into a weird spot cognitively, because ordinarily I like it. I like knowing when someone is not in something purely for financial gain, mm-hmm. because that means on some level they care about it in a way that cannot be quantified. And typically that kind of motivation results in better work, more passion. But yeah, you're absolutely right. You are absolutely right. And authorities believe that Kinahan's ability to duck the law so well and so often comes down to what they describe as meticulous planning and keeping an absolute minimum number of people in the know about business ventures.
Dude, and we didn't even really get into Christie's background too much. Like I said, fascinating read. I think he learned from the best. That's why if Daniel is, in fact, this mob leader, he's good at it because he learned from his father. His father went to prison for quite a while and ended up earning 2 degrees while he was in prison. He even gave up the opportunity to leave prison early because he wanted to finish a degree while he was in there. He allegedly owns hundreds of millions of dollars worth of properties in many places, allegedly. Mm-hmm. I haven't actually seen property deeds or anything like that. But, we're talking like $500 million home in one place, $160 million home in another place, like multiple properties, so many properties in Ireland. That guy, the father, was very good at what he was doing, and apparently very good at hiding money and travel and keeping operations very secret.
And he is alive right now as we record. He is happily retired in Spain, the father, mm-hmm. that is. Yes, yeah, there is a strong indication that I like the way you put it, that he learned from the best. And people believe they've cracked the code. Detective Superintendent David Gallagher from the National Drugs and Organized Crime Bureau of Ireland walked through the hierarchy of the gang, of the organization, in court. And he said they have this structure. It's very clever. It's the kind of thing, you and I would do probably. They have subcells. Everybody's organized into these cells, and they're structured such that if an operation goes wrong, or if someone tries to turn into an informant, which Irish media calls turning tout, by the way. I thought that was so cool. If someone does try to snitch, they will literally not have the information they need, because they'll only know about their part of the web, right? Mm-hmm. Their part of the process.
Well, and it's structured so that if somebody from that subcell is seeking information, specific information from higher up, it becomes an incredibly suspicious thing. And it's a way to root out people who may have turned tout.
Yes, it's true. It works both ways. So authorities also maintain that, yes, the organization's move toward the world of boxing may be real, legitimate. It actually has happened. But that doesn't mean that it's also, not still a crime ring. That's basically their argument. They're making that face in court that Matt just made. So there you have it. This story has some updates that we'll get to at the end of the show. But first, let's take a break for a word from our sponsor, and then we'll come back to talk just a little bit about boxing and crime in general, where there is a great deal of stuff they don't want you to know.
All right, we are back, and we are jumping into boxing and crime in general. A little bit of corruption, a little side of corruption. There's an outlet called journal.ie. It's actually really great. You should check it out if you can. There's a lot of cool reporting in there about boxing, just as the sport and this topic in general. Here's a quote from them. The sport and business of boxing has been infiltrated by criminal elements for the best part of 2 decades. The potential to earn large amounts of cash and to rub shoulders with the rich and famous at ringsides around the world proved alluring for Ireland's top criminals. Now, this makes sense. If you've ever... I'm going to take it to MMA instead of boxing, but it's not the same thing, right? From a science perspective, from the sport itself, but in the events, boxing and MMA are very, very, very similar. If you look at something the UFC puts on, at a big pay-per-view show, let's say something that happened not long ago, if Conor McGregor is fighting, and before, of course, quarantine and all of the coronavirus implementations where there's nobody in the audience, when you look at one of these big matches, down at the front, right near the ring, there are going to be celebrities and powerful individuals. Many times faceless powerful individuals, those who don't show up in the newspaper all the time. You don't recognize them when their face flashes across, but that person in that audience may be extremely powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. You get access. Mm-hmm. And access is a extremely valuable thing. So to react to that claim, what do we say? Well, yes, the conspiracy is real. I mean, for numerous reasons. Boxing as a sport has a long association with crime. And it also has, just the way it's structured, it has a great potential to be exploited and corrupted. I mean, think about it, all right? I always think of when we spoke with Brian Toohey, boxing in particular, you have a very small set of what we could think of as players, primarily the 2 boxers, but we also have just a few officials, right? And, a fight can be won based on a decision by those officials. So if any one of those people is convinced to take a dive, or if they're bribed to go one way or another with a decision, then it can be extraordinarily difficult to prove the fight was fixed, which means if you want to get into that business, you have 2 cool sources of revenue now. You can generate a ton of money through gambling and rigged outcomes. You can also launder a ton of dirty money because it's gambling. So what's not to love? Like, it makes sense to me. I've never fixed a boxing match, but I can see the appeal for certain people in the industry. And the weird part about it is, for fans of boxing and boxers themselves, you're probably much better off now than you were in the 1950s when boxing was crazy dirty. Like, the U.S. Senate investigated boxing. There's a cool site we found called The Ring, mm-hmm. that has a neat anecdote that I really think puts this in perspective.
Sure, here it is. The very era that many recall as one of the sport's true golden ages was so brazenly filthy and infested with gangsters and other ne'er-do-wells that the January 31st, 1955 issue of Sports Illustrated concluded an investigative piece on the state of the sports with the sentence, "Boxing today is a national scandal."
Boxing today. It's a national scandal. Back in the 1950s. So we often note the relationship between large amounts of money and corruption in multiple industries, right? In everything from investment banking to reality TV.
The stock market.
The stock market, of course. Even without considering the Kinahan case specifically, it turns out boxing is no different. And that is a crying shame because boxers, the actual people, not the industry surrounding them, are working their keisters off to be the best athletes they can possibly be. And as we said earlier, there's a pretty compelling argument to make that boxing is as much a science in some sense as it is a sport. But you could say that there are two fights for every bout. One is the fight between the people in the ring. And the other is the ongoing fight that legitimate athletes and fans of the sport have against incredibly powerful forces that seek to poison the game they love. And as we draw to a close here, Matt, obviously we have to point out at this juncture, there's been no accusation that Kinahan himself is attempting to rig this, the world's most important upcoming boxing match. And in fact, Ireland is so scandalized by his involvement that no one's really bothered to float the possibility of him fixing a match or ask how likely that might be. Given statements of industry professionals and athletes, it seems like people in that industry, a lot of people overwhelmingly trust him. So there we find kind of the morality that we were talking about at the top. I get the sense, I don't know if you feel this way, but I get the sense that people believe Kinahan, regardless of what else he does, probably holds the sport in very high esteem and would react pretty adversely. I think he would be offended if people said, hey, you're going to fix this match, right? And he doesn't, regardless of what you believe, he doesn't seem like the kind of person you would want to offend.
No, I mean, just because of his power in the sport, right? It doesn't matter if he's associated with any organized crime. His word means something generally. And again, here's another quote, just when talking about his connections within the sport itself, outside of anything else. Here it is. This is a source that said, "It's harder to find a boxer not linked to Kinahan than one who is. He dominates the boxing world and everyone knows it." Daniel Kinahan himself, as well as the organization that he's allegedly involved with, and the Hutch gang, that is the one at odds with the Kinahan cartel. It is weird to look at events and the social media feeds of popular boxers and MMA fighters. It is weird to see these characters show up in selfies. They show up in behind the scenes photographs of training. It does feel like there's a real connection there. Although, if you're not in the Garja, if you're not in the FBI or whatever organizations are investigating organized crime groups like that, it's tough to know whether any of it is real. Whether just because they're associated in pictures, just because they're ringside, just because they, own a gym, some organization owns a gym where important fighters train, it doesn't necessarily mean that everybody's in on the same game. But the connections and the associations, it's tough to miss.
Yeah, well said. Well said. And for a deeper look at the Kinahan case, do check out the excellent BBC Panorama documentary we talked about earlier. They argue that Kinahan, regardless of his current associations with past or present companies, continues to influence individual boxers and players in the industry on a personal level. Like he is embedded in this enterprise in such a way that it's very difficult to take him out of it. Also, recent reports from March argued that Kinahan might be branching out to soccer, football, for, of course, the rest of the world, through the actions of his former company, MTK, but that's kind of sticky because, again, officially he cut ties. And as the outcry over Fury and Kinahan's association grew, Fury ended up distancing himself from Kinahan, with Kinahan's blessing, by the way it's portrayed. It's got big mafia vibes, the way they talk about it, you know.
It does.
But a lot of that might just be the reporters. That's another part of it. So there we are, folks. The world of boxing, the world of crime, the saga of Daniel Kinahan and the Kinahan family. What do you think? Again, this is a fascinating story for us, but we keep coming back to the fact that, you know, this guy has never been convicted of anything. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And is it fair to judge the son by the sins of the father? I
don't know if it is, and I don't think it is. But at the same time, there are dedicated law enforcement officers and investigators who believe that this is what's happening. This is the thing. And there has been a ton of bloodshed associated here, and lives ruined and destroyed. And, you know, that's a tough situation, but it's really hard too, because as a fan of combat sports, like I want to still be able to watch boxing matches and MMA fights and stuff. And, depending on how deep this corruption is, maybe I shouldn't want to do that, but dang it, if I don't want to tune in, dude, ever since the Ultimate Fighter, like I can't get enough of these things, and I don't know why. I don't know if it's just some deep thing inside of us as humans that enjoy the stakes of having two people like locked in a cage that have to battle with each other. Maybe there's just something deeply in our nature about that, in my nature at least. Like, I don't want it to go away because it's corrupt. I don't know. It's a tough one. We'd love to know what you think about all of that stuff.
Agreed. Yeah, let us know. People who are familiar with the story, people who are familiar with the sport, we'd like to hear from you, and we try to make it easy to find us online.
Yeah, that's right. You can find us on Twitter and Facebook, where we are Conspiracy Stuff. On Instagram, we are Conspiracy Stuff Show. If you want to find us personally, Ben's got Twitter and Instagram going, I think.
That's true. Yes, the rumors are true. You can find me at Ben Bolin HSW on Twitter. The longtime listeners, you know what HSW means. And you can also find me on Instagram, where I am named in a burst of creativity at Ben Bolin, BOWLIN. How about you, Matt? You know, sometimes you tell us about where to find you online, and then sometimes you don't. So.
I know. I this time I'm not going to. What I am going to say, though, is the first time I ever met the founder of that thing called HSW that you just mentioned, I was on the set of a video called How Boxing Works. And,
that's right.
Mm-hmm, and it was the first time I got to be DP, or run the camera, essentially, be the videographer on a set. And it was great. We shot with an actual, I think he became a champion. When we were shooting with him, this boxer, he had just won some competition. I can't remember what it was, but he was incredible. Anyway, so weird thing. First video.
Are we becoming sentimental in our
I think so.
elder podcast age? Well, if that's the case, then hurry up and get to us before we expire. Hopefully of natural, non-boxing related causes. If you don't care for social media, you can call us directly. We have a phone number. We're 1-833-STDWYTK. 3 minutes. Those 3 minutes belong to you. Tell us whatever is on your mind. We do ask, that you include the following things. Give us your name or a sick nickname and let us know. We can use your voice or story on the air. Tell us what's up. Give us ideas for new episodes. And if there's something personal that you want to just keep between you and our team, then that's fine. Just throw it in at the end. But most importantly, do not censor yourself. If you have a story that doesn't fit in 3 minutes, then tell us the whole thing. Write it out. Send us an email. We read every email we get. You can find us, whether you are in the ring or outside of the ring, at our good old-fashioned email address, where we are
conspiracy@iheartradio.com. Stuff They Don't Want You to Know is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.